EUB 343 Assessment Task 2. Hello, my name is Chantel Blanche and my student number is N9970380. My tutors are Chris Blundell and Danielle Gordon. I attended the Thursday workshop from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. My PEC school was a foundation to Year 6 co-educational school. It was in a low socio-economic status area. I was in a Year 3 classroom that consisted of 23 students. It was also a mixed ability class. My focus is on Year 3 mathematics. The content descriptor from Year 3, number and algebra, fractions and decimals, is model and represent unit fractions including 1/2, 1/4, 1/3, 1/5 and their multiples to a complete whole. My learning intention was to understand parts of a fraction and how to represent fractions in multiple ways. Diagnostic and formative assessment were integral to student learning during my professional experience. Diagnostic assessment provides a student's current knowledge and understanding regarding a topic as well as existing misconceptions. Formative assessment, on the other hand, should be ongoing in order to identify the progression of students' understanding and knowledge of a topic. Formative assessment also allows for small group instruction and explicit teaching to take place for those students who require extra assistance. Haiti and Timperley's formative assessment system encompasses 3 components: feed up, feed back, and feed forward. Feed up ensures that the purpose of the task or unit is communicated to students so they have an understanding. It involves students asking, "Where am I going?" Feed back consists of students acquiring information about their learning success and needs. Here is where students ask, "How am I doing?" Feed forward guides the learning of students, which is based on performance data. Students now ask, "Where am I going next?" All 3 components are integral for high levels of learning to be achieved by students. It is important for students to understand the learning intentions and success criteria prior to commencing each lesson. This enables students to work towards their academic goal. Here is the diagnostic assessment that I created for my Year 3 class to gauge their prior understanding of fractions, and it consisted of 9 questions. This is the whole class diagnostic assessment results. So the key is 1, they got it correct, and 0, they got it incorrect. There's also a percentage correct column down the bottom for each question. As you can see, most children struggled with all the questions. Here is the individual diagnostic assessment results. There's a total item score column and a percentage correct column for each student. A common misconception identified is students thinking that the numerator and denominator are 2 unrelated independent numbers. Here, students are not grasping the aspect that the parts need to be equal. So I chose 2 students. Student 1 got 2 questions correct on their diagnostic assessment, and student 13, who also got 2 questions correct. Student 1 and 13 have an understanding that a fraction has a numerator and denominator, however do not have the knowledge of what they represent. Question 2 and 5 show that these students do not understand that the denominator is how many equal parts there are altogether. In a simple question that is asking what 1/2 of something is, both students are able to successfully do this. I made an anchor chart for parts of a fraction and presented this to the students after completing their diagnostic test. I explained what the numerator is and what the denominator is of a fraction. Students had to work out the numerator and denominator of the fractions at the bottom of the anchor chart, and I got the students to come up and physically write these in. I also created an anchor chart for ways to represent fractions. Before introducing this, I always recapped on parts of a fraction prior to commencing new content in order to consolidate their learning. I explained the different ways to represent a fraction. However, students were focusing on representing a fraction in the form of a word, part of a whole, and part of a set. At the beginning of each lesson, there was always a recap on both of the anchor charts that I had created to refresh the students' minds. A thinkboard was my formative assessment strategy 1. Thinkboards allow students to visually represent their ideas and understandings in different ways. Students use a thinkboard for the purpose of representing fractions in the form of a word, part of a whole, and part of a set. In doing this, students had to use their acquired knowledge of parts of a fraction to complete the task successfully. During the task, students used counters as a concrete manipulative to support them when modelling and organising their ideas for parts of a set. This is a think board of a student example. So there was a common misconception that a triangle could be split into 3 equal parts. I stopped the lesson and feedback was provided to the students on this misconception. I explicitly went back and taught the aspects of fractions needing to have equal parts. Following this, feed forward was given as I questioned the students on what type of shapes can be used to represent 1/3 and why this is. My formative assessment strategy 2 was a Plickers set. On the screen you can see the questions 1 to 5 of what the students had to do. Plickers is a formative assessment tool which is time and cost effective. Here are the results of the students' answers. So Plickers provides instant feedback to both the students and myself. Some students were not grasping the questions being asked, so therefore explicit instruction and explanation of each question was provided. The students then completed the set of questions again. Here are the results after completing the set again. So it's obvious that student 12, 16 and 17 still did not understand a question or two. I worked with these 3 in a small group in the afternoon where I was able to give further examples and explanation of each question. When providing feedback, the teacher examines work for an understanding of the topic. Often additional instructions are provided to those students who have difficulties, therefore feeding forward until understanding of the content is achieved. My formative assessment strategy 3 was providing the children with fraction word problems. So the questions were split and cut up according to the complexity level. The purpose of providing students with levels of complexity was designed to increase their mathematical learning and skills for different ability levels. Students had the opportunity to work with their elbow partner or someone close by. In doing so, students were enabled to share and extend their understanding and thinking as they were encouraged to work collaboratively. As I walked around the room, feedback on particular questions were provided to students, and they received feed forward through prompts and questioning. This is Student 1 and Student 13 artifact of answering the questions. This task gave me an indication of what students could do in terms of solving fraction word problems as I walked around the class monitoring. I was able to give whole class feedback after the completion of this task, where we worked through the problems as a class, highlighting the key information in each problem. I found that this was an effective strategy as students who struggled to complete them when I was monitoring were now able to complete them confidently. Formative assessment strategy 4 was a fraction puzzle that I made up. 20 out of 23 students got all 5 correct. This fraction puzzle was an educational game that provided the opportunity to embed formative assessment. This is formative assessment strategy 5 and was the final formative assessment that the students completed. Here are the whole class formative assessment results. Question 6 involved the concept of money, which students struggled with. The percentage correct for each question is displayed down the bottom. Here are the individual formative assessment results. There's the total item score column and the percentage correct column displayed again. Here you can see the drastic improvement in students' results from their diagnostic to now their final formative assessment in terms of fractions. This is Student 1's formative assessment. Student 1 got all questions correct. The diagnostic assessment was 22%, and now the formative assessment is 100%. Here is Student 13's formative assessment. Student 13 got 2 questions incorrect. In the diagnostic, it was 22%, and in their formative, it was 78%. Here the comparison there is still an increase. Throughout my professional experience, I used a range of informal and formal diagnostic and formative assessments to gauge students' understanding of the content being taught. For the focus of fractions in mathematics, I had to revisit and explicitly teach the basics. I also used concrete manipulatives to assist students who needed visual representations as well as those who didn't. In my future professional experience, there are a few aspects I want to implement. I would like to integrate more ICT into my teaching sequence in order to provide students with a different way of learning and to potentially increase student engagement. I'd also like to tailor lessons around student interests and continue to track students' progress and represent data to provide a visual representation of the results. In doing so, this enables me to adjust my pedagogical teaching practices and resources to accommodate students' different learning abilities. Thank you for listening.